I recently saw that the Rolling Stones had posted an article about a group releasing music on floppy disks. While definitely a bit hipstery, I was excited to see how they were going to get around the 1.4 megabyte limit of your typical 3.5-inch disc. But I was disappointed as I read the article because they're just putting 8-bit MP3s on there. So what's the point of even putting them on a floppy disk? And if they really want to be MP3 hipsters, they should release it on a format that works with old MP3 players, like Smart Media. But by all means, don't think you can't release music on floppy disk. Just release it as the format that's appropriate for it. MIDI. This is a Yamaha Disc Orchestra DOU-10, a General MIDI floppy disk player. Now, calling this a floppy MIDI disc player isn't really a fair description of what it is. This is just one of several different MIDI synthesizers with a floppy disk drive released in the early 90s. The DOU-10 is a relatively low-end unit compared to some of the higher-end stuff you could get, like the QX-10. Roland also produced some units similar to this, and even Brother got into it. Both manufacturers also produced boomboxes with floppy disk drives, one of which was reviewed by Techmoan in a cool video that you should also go check out. Before we start using this, let's go ahead and take a look at how we connect to it. Up front we have a 1/4-inch headphone port, and we have the slot-loading floppy disk drive. On the rear we have the 12-volt power input, 2 microphone ins, 2 microphone outs, and the MIDI in and MIDI out ports. Also worth noting back here is this switch that you may need to use to change which MIDI channels your device reads from. But now let's go ahead and pop in a disc, select our track, and hear this thing play. Now let's take a look at what the controls do while the unit's playing. So here we have the capability of repeating a certain section. So let's go ahead and start from here. And we can go from here. Now we'll just repeat that over and over again. Next we can have it repeat the entire song, but we won't know that until the end. Down here we can go through and mute different tracks. Now the first 2 tracks are just left and right, well, right and left, because this is meant to be used with a piano for learning. So we can also mute everything but those 2, and we can go through and select single tracks at a time, and we can remove those tracks, so we can go over to drums and make the song sound very strange, or we can have just drums and solo that. We also have a metronome, which would be a bit more useful for something like this. Then we can rewind in real time, and it will continue. And if you fast forward, it will play through while you're fast forwarding. The -1 and solo buttons can be used for some interesting effects. Now, the Doom MIDIs aren't terribly complex. They rely on basic drums, guitar, violin, the usual types of synth sounds that you'd use. But to those who've played Doom as much as I have, you probably noticed it sounded just a little bit different than you might be used to. And that's because this is a Yamaha synthesizer, not a Roland, and it's not being played from something like a Sound Blaster sound card. Now that just makes something simple like Doom sound just a little bit off, but something more complicated like Grab Bag will sound very different. Now, if the slightly different synth sounds aren't enough to put you off of one of these, there's a couple more drawbacks you should know about. For one, it can only read double density discs. That means you're going to get a maximum of 720K per disc, which in my experience comes out to 8 to 12 songs, depending on how big they are. It also doesn't just support any old MIDI. Most MIDIs you use are just going to give you this error message, as this only supports Type 0 MIDIs, not Type 1, the much more common format. In addition, while it has all these wonderful controls for changing how you're playing the song you're listening to, I've yet to find a way of making it play through to the next song. I see no reason for this to have that capability for what it's actually intended for, so it probably can't do it. Which brings me to what this thing's actually meant for. The Disc Orchestra name isn't just because it plays floppy disks and has a numerous amount of instruments like an orchestra. Well, I don't have any discs myself to demonstrate this. You could get discs made by Yamaha that were for Disc Orchestra units that would come with sheet music, so you could learn to play along with a song. However, if you already know how to play a keyboard, that doesn't make this device useless, as you can hook up a standard MIDI instrument to it and record your playbacks. You can actually use this as a multi-track MIDI recorder. So let's go ahead and take a look at it being used like that. Now, before I start recording, I'm going to go through and pick the instrument I want to use for that channel. I'll set my tempo. I'm going to activate the metronome, tell it I'm going to record to the right hand channel, and then I'm ready to start. Now, obviously, you could come up with something a lot better than that if you're not me and are able to put more time into this. But that gives you an idea of how this can easily work as a multi-track MIDI recorder. Now, about that double-density disk drive. You are able to open it up and pull the drive out, and it's even a standard 3.5-inch drive made by TIAC. The problem is if you try and put a 144 drive in there, you'll find it tries to constantly access the drive and won't read any disks at all. So this thing's doomed to a life of double density. In case it helps anyone, here is the main board inside. This thing is fully functional for me, so I don't really have to do anything in here. It's kind of strange. It looks like someone's replaced that part, but it has an older part number than almost everything else on here, so that's kind of weird. I'm not sure which one's the synth chip. I tried looking up this one, and that one, and I didn't get any really useful results, so not sure. Could just be all handled by what I'm guessing is the CPU there. This thing's kind of weird, though. I don't understand why they'd need so much power dissipation. Seems like something inefficient's probably going on in here. It gets pretty warm, and, well, that explains it. Now, if you wanted one of these things to actually record your performances with, you could probably get one of the 720K USB adapters that pretends like it's 100 floppy disks, I think. I don't know, I've never tried one. I bet one of those would work well in this, and that would be a lot better for you. But for me, the whole shtick is that it plays MIDIs off of floppy disks, which is just fun. Now, as much as I like the MIDI soundtracks for games like Doom and Duke Nukem 3D, that's not really enough to justify having one of these. Thankfully, people have been creating MIDI renditions of known songs for years, so there is a plethora of content out there for you to go and create your own discs with. Now, not all of these are terrific. For example, this rendition of Take On Me sounds more like it belongs on a Japanese karaoke disc than it does being played back for recreation. Well, I think that covers just about everything I wanted to cover on this. I didn't get a chance to do something else I wanted to do, which was try and connect this to my computer as a synthesizer. But I plugged it in, Doom did not immediately work with it, and after doing a small amount of research with people with Sound Blaster Lives, it looks like it's not going to be an easy task. So I'll put that off for another time, or just wait till I get a Roland that it's actually worth doing with. But for now, I'm really happy just being able to play MIDI floppy disks with it. I mean, this is a musical format that should have existed, but it didn't. This would have been really awesome. I don't know, maybe I like MIDI more than most people, but I think this is really cool. Well, I hope someone else enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.